This week on For the Record.
Do you feel like the state legislature has adequately tackled that issue this year?
We sit down with state assembly leadership to recap 2025.
If I think about the word of the year, it's really affordability.
We know that people want us to be addressing affordability in particular.
Plus, what did $111 billion get Wisconsin? We're breaking down one of this year's biggest political stories, the state's two-year budget. And later, after dozens of lawsuits against the Trump administration, does Attorney General Josh Kaul see more in 2026?
Do you think that this has been successful?
It has been. We've been winning case after case.
That's all coming up this morning.
Tough questions, real answers. Wisconsin's political conversations start here. This is For the Record.
Welcome to For the Record. I'm Ellie La Liberté. Well, this week we're sitting down with the Speaker and Minority Leader in the State Assembly to recap both the year that was and look ahead to 2026. We're breaking down everything from the two-year state budget to top issues and the future control for the chamber. We'll start with Speaker Robin Vos and then head to Minority Leader Greta Neubauer. What were the big headlines out of your chamber this year?
You know, our biggest thing that we always do is enact the budget. So it seems like forever ago, but last summer, if you remember, kind of right around the 4th of July, we had a huge bipartisan agreement. Governor Evers, Republicans, sat for weeks, negotiated a budget that invested in our priorities, and it cut taxes. So if I think about the word of the year, it's really affordability. There are 5 parts in my mind for what affordability is. It's how much you pay for government, housing, utilities, food, and power, electricity. So we took care of most of those. There's really nothing we can do about food, even though the cost is way too high.
Now, I asked the Minority Leader, Representative Neubauer, this question. I asked if the state legislature had done enough on affordability this year. She said no, but it sounds like you're saying yes.
Well, we can always do more. I mean, I think we have a lot to be proud of, and unfortunately, Democrats voted no on almost every affordability measure that we brought forward, even the ones that were bipartisan. So that's really disappointing. I think we need to focus on driving down costs, which means putting more money into the hands of moms and dads and families all across the state, making sure that we deliver services in an efficient manner and that we do it in a way that helps to make our state successful, not just grows the size of government. So we're hoping to come back in January by addressing that 400-year veto that Governor Evers was proud to sign, where he's taking full responsibility for these property tax increases, and I think most Wisconsinites just can't afford it.
And that 400-year veto, I mean, that passed in the Senate during that last floor session. That's something that you would like to see the Assembly take up pretty soon into the new year, it sounds like.
It's going to come up right away, probably in January, so that we can get it on the ballot as quickly as possible next year.
And I want to move now, too, because one of the points of disagreements we saw during the last floor session was when Democrats criticized you for a move that stalled legislation over expanding postpartum Medicaid coverage for new moms. You moved this legislation into another committee, essentially blocking a vote on the floor. Yeah. Why did you make that move?
Well, Wisconsin has done a really good job over the course of the past 20 years since Tommy Thompson created Badger Care. So if you're a child in poverty, before you are born, for the 9 months before, the mom and the child are paid for by the state, right? The health insurance is free. For the 3 months after, it's also free for the mom who's just given birth. And frankly, for a child in poverty, it's free until they're 18. So we have done a really good job providing a social safety net already in Wisconsin. I think the idea of expanding welfare might feel good, but in the end, it's not good for the mom, it's not good for society, and it's certainly not the best interest of the state of Wisconsin.
And Wisconsin is just one of 2 states that has not expanded this coverage. Are you saying every other state got it wrong, essentially?
No, but what happened is Wisconsin, when we had the Medicaid expansion debate, we did something different under Governor Walker. We created the social safety net. So if you're in poverty anywhere in Wisconsin, you're already covered by Medicaid. We've already covered the folks that are in there. We've already made sure that moms have the coverage that they need. Having them stay on welfare for up to a year just really isn't necessary.
Well, this legislation passed in the Senate and does have bipartisan support in the Assembly as well. Do you think it'll go through next year, or is there going to be efforts you take to try to stall it?
Well, it's certainly possible, but I think it's unlikely.
And I want to move now, too, because in 2026, obviously, we have some elections. Now, Democrats need just 5 seats, if I'm correct, to flip the Assembly. Are you worried about losing control of the chamber?
Look, I always worry about it, but for literally over a decade, every 2 years, the Democrats say the exact same thing. This is going to be the year they're going to turn Wisconsin blue and make us look like Illinois or Minnesota.
But for the Assembly, what's the strategy to maintain control?
Do the same as we've done before. We've worked on a bipartisan basis. We're focusing on affordability. We have a multi-pronged agenda that's going to come up in the spring session. Again, focusing on the cost of housing, the cost of property taxes. How do we do with utility costs? What happens with health care? We have good solutions for all of those. And I think on top of it, you hopefully have incumbents who are running for re-election on a good record, but also realizing that the status quo isn't good enough and wanting to fight for change.
Now, we mentioned a couple things throughout the course of this interview about hot topics and things you'd like to work on coming into 2026, but are there other things that day one you would like to tackle?
So for the spring session, it's really focused on property taxes. It's my highest priority. It's the biggest thing that we've heard about. We've got to find a deal on SNAP. We are working with Governor Evers to try to put together a package to increase verification so that people don't scam the system, and also get rid of junk food so that people who are on food stamps have more nutritious food. So that's an area that I think we'll hopefully be able to get done in January. We also have something to dealing with online sports betting, where it's already happening all across the country. I guess I'd rather have somebody in Wisconsin do it, so we got the revenue here as opposed to a far off place getting the revenue. So we're going to certainly talk about that. But a lot of topics that are going to occur over the next 8 weeks. It's an exciting time to be in the legislature.
And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thanks, appreciate your time.
In your eyes, what were the big stories coming out of the Assembly this year?
Sure. So we saw some bipartisan work happen on the state budget. It was really important that Democrats were at the table and improved that budget significantly. That made some significant investments in education, childcare, higher ed, and we prevented Republicans from cutting some essential programs in Wisconsin as well. So that was good to see. It's not the budget that will pass when we're in the majority, but it was progress to have Democrats, particularly from the state Senate, at the table. We didn't see a lot of other action from Republicans on the issues that are impacting Wisconsinites most. We know that people want us to be addressing affordability in particular.
Marquette Law School poll came out, and no surprise, affordability, cost of living was the #1 issue for voters. So overall, do you feel like the state legislature has adequately tackled that issue this year?
Absolutely not. So we're seeing people's healthcare costs go up in a real way, of course, because of actions at the federal level. And we've seen next to no action from Republicans here at the state level in Wisconsin on that issue. We put out bills on prescription drug costs earlier this year. Those have yet to get even a hearing in the Assembly or the Senate.
And what have conversations looked like with Republicans? Obviously, Democrats do need Republican support to get a lot of legislation through. Are there those conversations happening right now?
On healthcare, we have not seen much interest. We put out a bill on healthy school meals for all earlier this year that would lower grocery costs for a family of 4 in Wisconsin by about $1,800 a year. No interest in that bill either. We have seen some conversations on housing, and that's good. We did see a little money for childcare in the state budget, but again, people in Wisconsin are hurting right now. We're in the holiday season. There's a lot of expenses, and we just are not seeing our Republican colleagues take on that challenge and choose to show up and represent their constituents.
What would you like to see addressed #1 first day coming back in 2026?
It's got to be affordability. Again, we know that people are struggling, and there are many ways to get at that issue. In terms of unfinished business, we also have seen the bill to expand healthcare coverage for new moms in Wisconsin stall in this state. We know that there are enough co-sponsors of this bill in the Assembly for it to pass if it comes to the floor, and so we've been really pushing for a vote here. But Republicans have been unwilling to take a vote on this issue and to make sure that new moms and babies have adequate access to health care for a full year after that mom has given birth.
Yeah, because in November, we saw the speaker obviously move that petition into, basically that bill was then moved into another committee. Have you talked with the speaker about moving that forward at all?
We've been working for many years, and the speaker has been pretty clear that he does not support this bill. It's hard for us to understand when we're talking about essential, in some cases, life-saving health care for new moms in Wisconsin. My hope is that his caucus, our Republican colleagues, will push on him to say, this is something that the people of Wisconsin want, it's the right thing to do, and we can't allow this to stall any longer.
And so you think the pressure from fellow Republican colleagues for the speaker would be the way to move this roadblock out of the way?
I hope so.
And continuing this kind of look ahead to 2026, what would a successful year in the Assembly look like?
Well, we've only got a few months left of legislative session. We do hope that our colleagues will address the challenges facing our education system, that they will look at these affordability issues. We hope that we can think long term and look at the challenges facing our infrastructure in Wisconsin, making sure that we're supporting everybody to have access to the outdoors and clean drinking water and air. protecting our rights and freedoms, especially as they've been under attack by Republicans in Washington.
And I want to talk to a little bit about this control of the Assembly, because Assembly Democrats need 5 seats to flip it. What's the strategy to do that?
Yeah, so last year we picked up 10 seats, including some very close seats that were held by Republican incumbents. We've got 5 more to go. The path is clear. These are all districts that Democrats have won at different levels of the ballot, and we are recruiting great candidates who are very connected to their community. We've got teachers and coaches, small business owners, veterans, folks from public safety, farmers. These are folks who know their communities, who have struggled, who understand that their neighbors are looking for better from the state legislature, and who are ready to get here and work hard for their communities.
And do you think that's realistic to flip the Assembly?
I do, yeah. 5 more seats to go. It looks like it's going to be a good year for Democrats because people are not very happy with what's going on in Washington right now.
Thank you for sitting down with us.
Thank you.
We're breaking down one of this year's biggest political stories, the state's 2-year budget, when we come back. Welcome back to For the Record. As we reflect on the year in politics, we're breaking down some of the most consequential moves by lawmakers. Now, to dive deeper, I'm joined by former Republican strategist Brandon Scholes and former Democratic Mayor Dave Cheslevich. And I want to get started by just talking about the budget this year, because we'll take a look now at the governor signing that $111 billion budget at 1:30 in the morning in July. And let's just kind of start by breaking this down. That budget included more than $1 billion in tax cuts, increased funding for the UW system and K-12 schools, and child care subsidies. But what didn't make it in this budget?
Well, about $9 billion, because it started out as a $119 billion budget, whittled down to somewhere around 100. There were all sorts of little things that were put in this budget. And they were dropped because they needed to sit down and negotiate on the big items. So for Republicans, taxes; for Democrats, it was spending on education and others. The little things that you find in these budgets, funding for different agencies and different programs, really aren't the things that are kind of on the top of people's minds. And so it's kind of easy sometimes for the legislature to negotiate it. But, you know, they did make changes to corrections in terms of some of the prisons that they wanted to change. They're still getting around to that, what they're going to do in Green Bay and shut that prison down, what they're going to do in Lincoln Hills. So you saw a lot of things that probably were scaled way back while keeping the big ticket items that they negotiated on.
And let's talk too, because Democrats were really at the table, they say, for these negotiations. What was good, what was not good?
Well, I'll tell you, what was good, I think, was the overall tone of this budget process compared to the last several. It really was a little bit more bipartisan in tone. The attacks weren't quite as vitriolic as they've been in the past. There really was some real negotiation between Evers and Voss and LeMahieu and some of the Democrats in the caucus. I think the Democrats in the legislature probably felt more involved and connected to this process than they have in previous ones. And so I welcome that. I welcome the fact that this felt like state government back when Brandon and I were more active in it, where sure, there was partisan conflict, but people kind of worked things out and they found a way to get to yes. And so I thought that was a good development.
And for each party, what were the wins coming out of this budget?
For Republicans, they were all about tax cuts, so there was $1.5 billion of tax cuts. They also removed some of the tax increases that were coming. The governor wanted to increase one of the tax levels up to 9%. They took out the ability for municipalities to impose their own sales tax on some different things. So those were, that was a big thing. And I think also they wanted to do some work on child care, on education funding, both at the university and the K-12 level.
Yeah, and I think that was a big win for the Democrats. The top priority for the Democratic Party has long been funding for public education. And so they got a very significant increase for the UW, I think the biggest in a decade or longer, and then some more money for public K-12 education. So I think Democrats can feel good about this. As Brandon points out, the Republicans have some things they can point to too. I think it's a budget both parties can run on in 2026.
And I want to move now too, because we're talking about elections. Obviously, the big one in 2026 is the governor's race. We're seeing about more than 8 or 9
in the Democratic field and about 3 right now in the Republican field. What do you think about how that's shaping up? What are going to be the big topics we're following? What are we going to be looking for in this race?
Well, I feel lonely because I'm the only Democrat not running for governor. I think, you know, for the Democrats, again, it's going to be that affordability issue. They're all talking about it. They'll go to the tried and true favorites for the Democrats. So reproductive rights, of course, is something they'll always touch on. Education funding is something they'll always touch on. If you look at the announcements from the Democrats, they've all pretty much hit on the same issues. But they'll go back to that affordability issue. And again, I don't think there's so many details they can really talk about, but they're going to hammer away at it and try to put the blame for the affordability issues on the plate of the Republicans, probably Tom Tiffany, I suppose, in the Republican Party.
The biggest problem I think Democrats will have is there are 8 or 9 in the primary. That means it's anybody's race. You could be the top person at the race, but with everybody taking a chunk out of the votes, it could be anybody's race. I mean, you know, you could say, okay, so-and-so is in the lead right now. All right, but there's not a lot of room there for mistakes. And so if they're all talking about the same issue, affordability, and if it's not solution-based, but it's recognizing a problem, that doesn't cause separation from these 8 or 9. You got 3 or 4 up here, a couple here, and 1 or 2 down here. They're going to have to make a case on these issues, whether it's affordability or prisons or whatever it is, to separate themselves from the pack, because if they don't, it's anybody's game right now, and it's early.
I disagree a little bit. I don't think it'll really come down to issues. I think it'll come down to electability. I think Democrats are still in a very practical mood. They just want to nominate somebody who can win in November. And in the end, it's not going to really be 8 candidates. It's going to be 3 or 4 who are really viable. And I think most Democrats are going to look at this very practically, and they're going to decide, well, who's the candidate who's most likely to keep the governor's office in the hands of Democrats. And I think they'll make a very practical decision. So I don't think it's going to come down to one issue. And I don't see the candidates really wanting to differentiate themselves very much on any of those things. So we'll see.
That's all I have for you both this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So For the Record, we'll be right back.
You're watching For the Record with host Ellie La Liberté.
From dozens of lawsuits against the Trump administration and a state Supreme Court ruling that gave his department more authority, we're sitting down with Attorney General Josh Kaul to recap 2025.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to go ahead and just get started with the easy question, which is, what do you think the top stories coming out of your office are for this year?
Well, my top priority at the Department of Justice is public safety, and we've made progress on some significant issues. I'm really proud of the work that we do on those issues. That includes things like drug trafficking or homicides and other very serious offenses. I also advocated for additional funding in the state budget for crime victim services, and while there wasn't as much included as I asked for, there was $20 million plus additional funding for CACs, $4 million for those child advocacy centers. Our Office of School Safety continued to do important work to help make schools in Wisconsin as safe as possible. And then we also recently talked about the Overdose Death Initiative, which was launched in 2024, where we have investigators working in collaboration with others, both local and federal officials, county and federal officials, to ensure that when there's an overdose death, that there's a full and thorough investigation.
I just want to quickly jump in and ask about this budget here, because we saw the state crime lab report just come out, and one of the things you mentioned in that was the lack of the 19 positions. Talk to me a little bit about what it means to not have those positions. Yeah, unfortunately, we have not had the kind of investment in our crime labs that we have repeatedly called for. The good news is we've made some significant enhancements to the labs over the years. There's a new Milwaukee crime lab being built, but we haven't had investment from the legislature. So in the last budget, we asked for 19 positions for the labs. There were 0 that were provided. Having those resources helps ensure that the labs are operating efficiently and can help cut down turnaround times. And I want to move now to some federal topics, because you've been a part of dozens of lawsuits against the Trump administration. And I want to ask, overall, do you think that this has been successful?
It has been. We've been winning case after case, and so we've gotten a lot of favorable rulings from courts. The Trump administration, in some cases, has also backed down, but the impact has been really significant. There are hundreds of millions of dollars in one-time funding that's at stake in these cases that has been preserved because of these actions or because the Trump administration has backed down.
Is this a sustainable route for the next 3+ years of the Trump administration?
It's my hope that the administration is going to see order after order ruling against it and say, we want to follow the law. We don't want to keep violating the law. We don't want courts to continue to find that what we're doing is impermissible. That hasn't been the approach that the administration has taken so far, but ultimately that's a call for our executive branch and the federal government to make.
And I want to ask, too, because in June, the state Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the Republican-controlled Joint Finance Committee doesn't have the authority to approve settlement agreements made by your department. What did that ruling mean for the DOJ?
Well, that was a really positive step. You know, when I was first elected in 2018, the legislature rushed into a special session to try to take authority away from the governor's office as well as my office, and that is one of the cases we've been involved in that has pushed back against this and protected our ability to resolve cases. What it means is that there are now cases we can resolve more efficiently, that we can move forward without having to go to a legislative committee, and it's helped restore the balance of powers between the executive branch and the legislative branch.
And just to kind of wrap up our conversation, I want to look forward to 2026 really quickly and ask, what are you thinking are some of the big headlines you'd like to see out of next year?
Well, I want to build on the progress that we've been making. On public safety, for instance, we are making important progress, but there's a lot more to do. So I look forward to continuing to fight for funding for crime victim services, or to get long-term funding, this will probably be in 27, but for the Office of School Safety, so that office is in good position for the long term. We have a lot of these pending cases that are still ongoing, and so having good resolutions in those cases is important to protecting the freedoms of Wisconsinites, but also to protecting critical programs. And we've got to keep doing the work we're doing at Wisconsin DOJ to protect people's pocketbooks.
That was a condensed version of our conversation with Attorney General Call. To hear more about specific cases, you can visit channel3000.com. For the Record, we'll be right back. Before you go, our state's version of C-SPAN, Wisconsin Eye, went dark on December 15th because of fundraising challenges. But now the nonprofit says it's making progress to get back on the air. WISI is now asking for help to raise $250,000 to fund the first quarter of 2026. This money would mean that WISI could return to on-air and online for the spring session. To donate, you can go to wisi.org. And that does it for us this week. And a reminder, you can watch full episodes of the show as well as expanded interviews on our website, channel3000.com. Have a great rest of your weekend and Happy New Year. For the Record, I'm Ellie La Liberté.
This has been For the Record.